Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So I've done several of these shows today, and I'm debating on whether or not this is going to be my habit for doing shows where I see news items and I do those news items as it processes through the day. I'm not sure yet. This is right many shows. I think people might get tired of me, to be honest, if I'm doing this often. Nevertheless, this is like multiple shows for the day, so I think they went okay. I'll know later. That being said, this I found to be somewhat interesting. So, as you know, the UK has been going through some interesting political times. Let's say it that way. There's Brexit going on. What does Brexit mean? Brexit means Brexit. They're trying to leave the EU, and in the process of leaving the EU, they hit the snag with the Irish border. So there's that. Then, out of the blue, there's a spy that went down, a former Russian spy. He was a double agent. He was working for Russia and then working against Russia. He was poisoned. Theresa May comes out, says Russia is the likely target of the poison, and in this condemnatory tone, like a mother scolding her kids, saying you have 1 day to confess. Okay. Can we see the evidence that you're using to condemn us? Straight question. Now, fantastically, the United States maniac, Nikki Haley, comes in and says, the United States is backing you. You have our full support. Donald Trump finally comes through, puts in sanctions. Germany aligns with them. Now, France is sane. I've joked Macron, but Macron in this sounded sane. We don't do fantasy politics. We actually want evidence before we come to a conclusion that somebody did something. The only word we have right now is Britain pointing the finger at Russia. You've heard the Western powers make their case. You heard the Western powers being hysterical about this. You've heard me say, be very careful in believing the things that these guys say because countries lie. We have a hard time believing that countries would do certain things because we look at these things as if they're just us. Bob at the grocery store. Well, Bob at the grocery store is going to eat his Cheerios, play his Xbox, maybe have sex with his wife or his girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever. But he's not looking, even at work, when has some kind of antagonistic thing with somebody at work. At most, it probably get to is him talking bad about the guy behind his back. It's not a spy sitting somewhere coming up with plans to bomb Cubans in order to create pretext of a war. But the fact is, there are people out there who have these thoughts and who make these plans and who work for certain governments. There are people in the government. They have a wife, they have a kid, they may have friends, they may have neighbors and everything else. But when they go to work, they're talking about killing and murdering other people. They're sadistic human beings. And yet those human beings exist and those human beings work for governments. My point in this is that you can't necessarily look at politics and the events as if they're just you. They have a different filter of the world and they have a different way of seeing the world, and they're operating based on the way they see the world. That's the first point. The second point is, be very careful with taking everything that the government says as a flat fact. And that also goes for taking everything that the media says as a flat fact. Be aware of the hysteria that these people can whip up and be solid despite the hysteria. Meaning, don't take something from somebody just because it's coming from somebody else. If the government is telling you something that they want you to be hostile for somebody else, they need to show you that. It's not enough for Theresa May to come out and say they did it. You need to demonstrate that. If it was anywhere else, if it was a court of law and somebody says you did something, you would want to be able to confront that person in a court of law. You don't want that person to be the end all be all of the information. You would want something else, some other third impartial party to be part of the determining factor in what took place. The sarin gas attack in Syria was a false flag. It was likely a false flag. It's likely that the rebels themselves released that sarin gas in Syria. Now, the United States and the rest of the world blame Syria for this. They didn't wait for the evidence. They didn't wait for the investigation. They just blamed Syria. Syria had nothing to gain by doing that. The only people who had something to gain were the rebels, which means of trying to pull the United States further into the war. There were no weapons of mass destruction. I hate that you have to keep doing this, but I keep doing this because I keep trying to make the point. You have to be very careful with what your media and your government says. They whip up a certain amount of hysteria to get you positioned in a particular way. Do not allow them to position you that way. It's one thing if there are barbarians at your gates. There are no barbarians at your gates. None. You are creating your... And right now, Russia, 2 days ago, has just said the United States is planning a false flag attack in Syria, using that as a pretext to attack Damascus, which if they do so, Russia will attack us. Understand the situation to which you're presented with. That's what I'm saying. Britain getting involved in this, it looks suspicious to me. It looks extremely suspicious to me. Listen to the Russian envoy. He's giving his testimony. They've shown, you've seen everybody hollering at the top of their lungs about what's taking place. Let's hear it from him. What is Russia's perspective of this? Let him tell you himself. Don't take their word for it.
The Security Council to change the format of the meeting and change it from closed consultations to an open briefing.
Господин председатель, вчера после распространения в Совете Безопасности письма о безопасности изменить формат проведения с закрытых консультаций на открытый брифинг. И сделали мы это не просто так, потому что мы хотели, чтобы все видели, что здесь происходит. Потому что в этом письме, в котором содержатся абсолютно безответственные заявления, и которые мне даже трудно комментировать в дипломатических выражениях, содержится угроза суверенному государству, постоянному члену Совета Безопасности. И идут вразрез с международным правом и статьей 2.4 Устава ООН. Мне хотелось бы понять, наши британские коллеги хотя бы это понимают? Первый вопрос, который мы хотим задать. Почему представители Соединенного Королевства тащат этот вопрос в СБ? При этом игнорируя установленные процедуры, которыми Лондон в соответствии со своими международными обязательствами обязан следовать, а именно задействовав профильные организации. Если речь идет об использовании на территории королевства токсичного вещества. Нам, собственно, очевиден ответ на этот вопрос. Наши партнеры тянут этот вопрос на площадку СБ, потому что понимают, что настоящих экспертов в области химоружия в Гааге их доводы не убедят. То есть, в действительности, они боятся настоящего профессионального разговора на эту тему. Все говорят только о том, что инициаторами руководят совершенно иными мотивами. Российская Федерация считает абсолютно неприемлемым голословные обвинения, изложенные в обращении премьер-министра Великобритании Терезы Мэй от 13 марта на имя генерального секретаря ООН о якобы причастности нашей страны к применению СОЛДа и отравляющих веществ. От нас в ультимативной форме потребовали 24-часовой срок, по сути, признаться в совершении преступления и осуществить явку с повинной. Мы сами языком ультиматумов ни с кем не разговариваем. И с собой разговаривать в таком тоне не позволим. Но мы люди вежливые. И 13 марта направили в Foreign Office ноту, в которой подтвердили непричастность России к этому инциденту и запросили образцы примененного вещества и совместное расследование. Тем более, что одна из пострадавших — гражданка Российской Федерации. В этом нам было отказано. То есть, нагнетая истерику...
Right there. The request shouldn't have been refused. It shouldn't have been refused. You're accusing somebody of something. Can I see the evidence that you're using to accuse me? No. Fuck you mean I can't see the evidence that you're using to accuse me? You're blaming me of something. You have secret evidence and you're blaming me of something? Can I see the evidence that you're using to accuse me? No. No, you can't. Come on. Tell me that's not a little suspicious. If they actually had the evidence they say they had, wouldn't you want some international body to be able to say, yes, this is exactly what you said it is? His point is, if they would have taken this to The Hague or to those particular chemical scientists that actually look at this and know what they're looking at, if they would have taken it to The Hague, their scientists would not have been convinced with what Britain is saying. Let's keep going. And by the way, if you're honest, he has a point. If you're honest with yourself, he has a total point. Let's keep going.
In other words, historical atmosphere is being created by London and also being completely non-transparent. We saw today the announcement that Russian diplomats are being expelled and by lateral relations are being frozen. I want to ask my UK colleague whether this applies to the UN as well. We also saw announcements about a prepared cyber attack against Russia. We would like to warn that this will not remain without reaction on our part. We are compelled to make the following conclusion, that the authorities of the UK are interested in finding the truth last. They're guided by something else. They are using the propaganda war ways of recent years, and they are trying to thus influence the public, which is very easy to influence and not well educated.
He said they're planning a cyber attack against Russia. He said that is, wow. He said that we have evidence or we have information saying that you guys are planning a cyber attack against Russia. Wow, let's keep going. And he also made the point, you guys are using this for political ends. Now, in the United States, and again, I am a product of where I am, and I am cynical because of my environment in this. He says the public is easily influenced because they're not well educated. That's what it sounds like he said. But beyond that, Hillary Clinton did use the Russia thing for political ends. And yes, that is a mighty dangerous strategy to position your followers, your cult-like followers, into, I guess, into this kind of angst and into this kind of opposition with another country for something that the other country didn't do. All countries fuck around with getting information, enacting, I guess you can say, this kind of soft power or soft inactions with other countries. The United States has toppled other governments, let alone influencing elections, going so far as to put in strongmen, dictators, into those countries. We've interacted with other countries just within the last 8 years. I am amazed that this is the hysteria that's taking place in the United States. Understand why I'm so against this. It's not that I think Vladimir Putin is fucking awesome. I don't want my country being engaged in a war, nor do I want my country engaged in proxy wars, nor do I want Britain engaged in a war. And it seems like these little things keep coming up that pushes in a particular direction. And I am saying, be skeptical of what these guys are saying, because it sounds a little dicey. That's all. It sounds dicey. Is it possible that Russia did it? Yes, it's possible that Russia did it. Should you just take her word for it? No. No, you shouldn't. Get evidence. I understand that people want to, I guess for whatever reason, blame Russia. I don't understand this blame Russia thing, but whatever. If that's the position you're in, if that's the filter you're using, look at it from their perspective for the moment, though. Assume for the moment they're not necessarily guilty, and look at it from their perspective. Wouldn't you, like anybody else, want to be able to plead your case or have the person and make their case against you Not necessarily just, did you do it or didn't you do it, and I'm only asking you the question to get you to confess. Those are different. If it's true, if it's real, if you're right, if you actually have evidence and that evidence can stand up, then you need to show that evidence to the international community and let them be the judge in a transparent way. That is the opposite of what's taking place. It is unfair, magnificently unfair, egregiously unfair to just blame the country, and everybody is jumping on this blame game, and there's been no investigation at all. There's been no investigation. What he's asking for fundamentally is, shouldn't there be an actual investigation? I don't quite understand why people are against that. It seems that if their real goal was to get to the truth of the matter and figure out what took place, they would want to have an investigation, which makes me think that is not exactly their real goal. Be skeptical of your government and be skeptical of your media. Let's keep going.
Does not have any facts without that, other than the unsubstantiated claim that there is a Russian trace in all of this.
Кстати, это далеко не первый случай, совершенных при весьма туманных обстоятельствах покушений на жизнь российских граждан или выходцев из России в Великобритании, которые до сих пор не расследованы, или возобновление с которыми нам было отказано. Лондону для начала следовало бы разобраться с тем, что происходит на его
try and determine what it is that's happening on
Прежде чем
their
обвинять
territory
других, воспитанные люди обычно наводят порядок у себя дома.
ahead and accusing others, because that's what polite people do.
Мы предложили британской стороне немедленно задействовать процедуры, предусмотренные пунктом 2 статьи 9 Конвенции о запрещении химического оружия. Она предусматривает обращение за разъяснениями и предоставление запрашивающему государству-участнику ответа как можно быстрее, но в любом случае не позднее, чем через 10 дней после получения запроса. Британские коллеги знают об этом. Мы предложили британской стороне немедленно задействовать процедуры, предусмотренные пунктом 2 статьи 9 Конвенции о запрещении химического оружия. Она предусматривает обращение за разъяснениями и предоставление запрашивающему государству-участнику ответа как можно быстрее, но в любом случае не позднее, чем через 10 дней после получения запроса. Британские коллеги знают об этом, но не спешат воспользоваться положениями Конвенции, членами которой они являются. Мы требуем предъявления материальных доказательств якобы обнаруженного российского следа в данном резонансном деле.
Russian trace in this
Без
high
этого
resonance
заявление о наличии неопровержимых данных
stating
в расчет
that there is
приниматься не будет.
incontrovertible truth is not something that we
Пока
can take
ничего,
into
кроме
account.
highly likely, мы не видели.
Until now, we have not seen anything besides stating that this is highly likely.
Right, and that's important because he's right. Theresa comes out, it's highly likely that this is taking place. The rest of the world says, well, she says it's highly likely. I guess it's the word of God. And everybody jumps on board. And he's like, I demand material proof. You've accused me of something. You say there is a trace that can trace this back to Russia, trace this back to us. That you know that. Fair enough. Show it. Show it. If 2 + 2 is 4, show me the equation. Show me how you get to that point. Show me and the rest of the world that what you're accusing me of is true. We want to interrogate the evidence that you're using. He is right. I don't care how Russia-phobic you are. If you're being honest with yourself, he is right. Anyone would ask for that. Any person that got pulled off the street would want to know, why are you holding me in this chair? It's like, why are you arresting me? What did I do? Who is accusing me of what? Anybody would want that right to address their accuser in court, if you want to call it that way. What it boils down to is, you're accusing me of something. You need to show me what you're accusing me of. You say that you have something that traces back to Russia, and you have some kind of scientific means to do so. Show us the scientific means. Show us the material goods. We can have that conversation. Right now, the only thing I have is your assertions. Let's keep going. If you're being honest, what he's saying is correct. Be skeptical of your government. That's all I'm saying. I know I keep saying that. They are hysterical here. They're hysterical. I don't want that to happen to the UK. And understand they use this type of hysteria to attack left-wing groups and left-wing movements. Be skeptical of your government. Governments lie. Make her show you the evidence before jumping on this bandwagon of Russia did it. Let's keep going.
В этой ситуации правомерно обратиться за помощью к техническому секретариату ОСКО в проведении независимого лабораторного анализа имеющихся в распоряжении британских властей образцов. Теперь несколько слов о химии. В Российской Федерации никакие научные исследовательские и опытные конструкторские разработки под условным названием «Новичок» не проводились. С начала 70-х годов в целом ряде
стран... Sorry guys, I had to flip over to a better network. Started to act up. He's making a really good point. He's making a really good point. He's like, how on earth are you guys pointing the finger at us saying we're using these type of chemicals when the United States also hasn't gotten rid of their stockpiles? You guys also have these type of weapons. You haven't gotten rid of yours. How are you wagging your finger at us? He's right. Let's keep going. There's this weird favoritism that goes on in international politics that I don't quite understand why it happens. Let's keep going.
90s, the Western Special Services moved to the West a number of our specialists, and their names are well known. And also some documentation was taken out of our country and continued their work in this area, including in the US and the UK. The positive results that they've obtained are creating new chemical agents which, for some reason in the West, are classified as Novichok, has been confirmed and reflected in more than 200 open sources of NATO countries, and we do have the reference to that. And we.
This is what he's saying. He's making the point that you guys have these chemicals. You guys have these chemicals. These things are in NATO countries. You guys are acting like the only place that this chemical is made is in Russia. You also have those chemicals. You can't just blame us. You also have them. This fucking fascinating conversation. Because understand, these are states that are interacting with one another. This is not Mitch McConnell, slapping Chuck Schumer. This is states. The states are somewhat higher. These people have military weapons. They have nuclear weapons. These nuclear weapons can be used to destroy other people, other human beings in other countries. And I think you're seeing this flamboyant hypocrisy that's being thrown about. Russia's using this particular chemical, Novichok, and he's saying, we have classified information, or you guys have classified your chemical making. And in those classified documents, you have that stuff for the same thing. And that same chemical is in NATO nations. What are you talking about? That the only place that has this stuff is us, and you're accusing us of doing this. Let's keep going. I like it.
We stand ready to provide you with them.
The
identification per se.
In fact, let me back up on that part just to make sure everybody saw that part, because that's damn important in what he's saying. Right now, as far as I can tell, Theresa May's case boils down to Russia has this chemical, ergo Russia is guilty. He's making the point other places have that chemical also. Let's let him say it.
Stocks of chemical weapons, and this has been verified by the relevant international entity, namely the Organization on the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. By the way, the United States has not, to date, destroyed their chemical stockpiles. In the middle of 1990s, the Western Special Services moved to the West a number of our specialists, and their names are well known. And also some documentation Iran was taken out of our country, and continued their work in this area, including in the US and the UK. The positive results that they've obtained on creating new chemical agents, which for some reason in the West are classified as Novichok, has been confirmed and reflected in more than 200 open sources of NATO countries, and we do have the reference to that, and we stand ready to provide you with them. The identification per se of the toxic substance used in the incident was carried out in Port Down, which is a scientific center of the Ministry of Defense. This is the place which was a basis for the development of chemical weapons, including the chemical weapons of this kind. The most probable source origin for this chemical are the countries which have, since the end of the 90s, been carrying out intensive research on these kinds of weapons, including the UK. But we're not chemists here. Let me just quote the opinion of a professional chemist. For the British specialists to be perfectly confident in stating that this gas is a Novichok kind of gas and not any other kind, they need to have the what we call control standard. In order to prove that that exact compound, it needs to be compared to a standard. If they state that this gas is a Novichok kind of gas, well, that a priori means that they have a standard for this substance. In other words, they have a collection and they have the formula.
I understand what he's saying. That's awesome. He's essentially making a point like, this chemical is supposed to be banned. Yes. How do you know that it's what you said is? How do you know that it's Novichok if you don't have anything to compare it to? Now, if this chemical is banned, then you shouldn't have anything to compare it to. Ergo, if you're saying that it's Novichok, that means you would have to have something, the chemical itself, meaning you're still carrying the chemical. That's actually pretty fascinating. Now, I assume that governments have those chemicals. I assume that governments don't get rid of those things. So to me, this is not necessarily mind-blowing. But he is, I mean, look, he's making a point. You guys are being hypocrites. You guys are being hypocrites. And not just being hypocrites. A, how do you know it is what it is unless you have a sample of that particular thing? And B, how do you know it came from Russia? How do you know it came from Russia? Let's let him keep going. He's making a good point. I like his argument.
And this is the most important point in this whole story. In other words, if the UK is so firmly convinced this is the Novichok gas, then that means that they have the samples of this and they have the formula for this and they're capable of manufacturing that. Mr. President, we are living in a very, very special times. In front of our eyes, incredible things are happening. Process of replacing the presumption of innocence with the presumption of guilt is taking place. And this criminal law principle is now being transferred into international relations. Today, Ambassador Haley, as an experienced chemist and an expert in that area, talked today about the crimes committed by Russia. We have known for a very long time that for you, in order to determine who is the guilty party, no investigation is needed. In the letter by the Prime Minister of the UK, it is stated that this is highly likely. But even in this, you have exceeded your reliable ally. If the Soviet prosecutor Vyshinsky thought that confession was the best kind of proof, well, now, using the expression of Minister Lavrov, what is the best kind of proof is suspicion. It is no longer necessary to show to the Council test tubes with unknown white substance in it. It is enough to send a letter which contains an egregious attitude towards a sovereign state.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I love that. I love that. He's like, so if you remember, he's talking about Colin Powell. He's talking about Colin Powell standing up there with the vial saying, you know, yellow cake uranium. They got weapons of mass destruction. We're going to have to go into Iraq and punch Saddam in the face. He's talking about that. You don't even have to bring a white fake substance. You can just send a letter saying that you're guilty. We don't even have to go through the charade. Russia did it. Let's just go. Let's do something. I love that. Comparing it to weapons of mass destruction. Yeah, this is the Iraq thing again. This is exactly what it is. I can't say this is exactly what it is. Russia, it's possible that Russia did it. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not even going to, you know. But they don't know either. They haven't done an investigation. That's my point. What makes me suspicious about this is that they haven't done an investigation. They haven't handed over the evidence. They haven't given anything. They've asserted Russia did it. It went from highly likely to Russia did it. That makes me extremely suspicious, especially with the stuff going on in the United States. If you look at the track record of things that happen, events that happen, the pretext for those things, imagine for the moment that the CIA did carry out that hit where they killed those Cubans. Imagine for the moment they did that. What would the newspaper say? What would politicians say? What would the president of the United States say at that point? He would say, Cuba did this. This is egregious. We can't allow them to do this. We need to go in. That's what he would have said. The newspapers would have told exactly what the president said. They would have been stenographers. They would have written story after story after story about how everything took place and everything else. And it would have all been a lie. It would have all been a lie. When they came up with the plan to shoot down a plane in order to get pretext to go into Iraq, again, what would the newspapers have said? What would the media have said? What would the politicians have said? I look at the world through those lenses. That's the lens I look at the world. That's the way I look at politics. I don't trust them. I don't trust the media in this regard either. Yeah, some of the events they tell you are true, but the context is always missing in those events. It's hard to actually put that stuff in context unless you actually know a little wider bit of history to put it in context. I feel this way is the same. They're coming up with something on the fly. Within a day, they've condemned Russia. Shown no evidence. It's all been assertion. It makes perfect sense, particularly when you're talking about nations, to actually go to people where they can have other people to see what's taking place as opposed to the assertions. It makes me suspicious that it's not what they say it is, because they don't want to give the evidence to prove that it is what they say it is. If Russia did it, fine. But don't you at the very least want to know that Russia did do it and not just take Theresa May's word for it? That's all I'm saying. That just seemed like good sense to me. I don't quite understand why it wouldn't be. And yeah, it does sound like weapons of mass destruction. There are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. You go into Iraq. Oh, our bad. There are no weapons of mass destruction. If they're going to show it, they need to prove it. That's all I'm saying.
And we are witnessing the same when it comes to Syria. Now Russia is being pushed towards the number of those who violating the convention. Let me simply remind you.
The last part. He said we're seeing the same when it comes to Syria. Russia has put out a thing saying they're expecting the United States to issue a gas attack, a sarin gas attack again. If you remember the first sarin gas attack, it was the rebels. Most likely it was the rebels. The Syrian government had nothing to gain from it. Seymour Hersh said the rebels had got their hands on a substance in order to do that particular gas attack, using that as a pretext for the United States to invest itself further into the war. They're expecting another gas attack. Russia said they have evidence, well, not evidence, they have, I guess you can say, intel, that another sarin gas attack is coming that the United States is going to use as a pretext to attack Damascus. Now, the reason they say that, the United States has been helping the Syrian rebels, the terrorists in this campaign. The United States itself is functioning as a terrorist in this campaign since the United States is there illegally. And with those terrorists, launch gas attacks and then turn around and said the Syrian government did this and we're going to attack the Syrian government now that the Syrian government launched a gas attack that they really didn't launch. It's a false flag. That's what he means. That's what he's talking about in the speech. The speech just happened a few hours ago. Let's let him keep going.
Вооруженных нападениях на независимые государства, в том числе с использованием ложных доказательств.
In illegal attacks on independent states, including using unsubstantiated proof. Yugoslavia, Iraq, Libya.
Это привело к неисчислимым страданиям
мирного населения. This led to numerous suffering amongst civilians.
О том, что Великобритания известна как государство, прибегающее к практике целевых убийств с использованием дронов.
Which uses targeted assassinations by drones. Listening, hearing from you invectives against us is something that is odd. And when there is no proof behind them, it's all the more odd.
Again, I love that point. It's like you guys have hit lists where you in the United States have been murdering people with drones. He said it is weird. He said it is odd to hear you complain about somebody killing a spy when you guys have been hit lists and killing people left and right with drones. Let's let him keep going.
В юриспруденции, да и в жизни вообще есть принцип «qui bono».
The principle qui bono or qui prodest. In other words, look for those for whose benefit this is being done.
Как вы думаете?
Well, what do you think?
Выгоден этот инцидент России накануне президентских выборов и чемпионата мира по футболу?
Is this something that benefits Russia on the eve of presidential elections and the World Football Championship?
Зато я знаю сразу несколько стран.
But I can name a number of countries.
Но я в соответствии с принципом презумпции невиновности не буду называть их
abiding by the principle of the presumption of innocence, I will not name them.
И обвинения в нем России чрезвычайно
of a number of countries who would benefit a great deal from this incident and accusing Russia of it.
Как вы думаете, какой мотив, на который ссылается премьер-министр Великобритании у России для устранения Сергея Скрипаля, который после расследования дела, осуждения, отбытия срока, помилования и выдачи британским властям не представлял никакой угрозы для нашей страны? Зато он прекрасно подходит на роль жертвы, которой можно оправдать любую немыслимую ложь, грязь, черный пиар в отношении России. Мы неоднократно предупреждали, что что-нибудь в этом роде, какая-то провокация накануне известных событий может случиться. Сегодня мы свидетели того, что власти Соединенного Королевства ведут курс на сознательное очернительство России, не гнушаясь никакими методами. У английского классика Артура Конан Дойля, прославившего свою страну и очень популярного в России, в его рассказах о Шерлоке Холмсе есть один незадачливый и комичный персонаж. Инспектор Лестрейд из Скотланд-Ярда. Он не обладает сугубым интеллектом и не владеет дедуктивным методом. Его роль оттенять необычайные детективные способности Шерлока Холмса. Он, Лестрейд, немедленно хватается за поверхностные следы преступления и спешит с банальными выводами, с тем, чтобы быть опровергнутым Шерлоком, который всегда находит подоплеку преступления и истинный след. Боже упаси меня подозревать современных сотрудников Скотланд-Ярда в непрофессионализме. Хотя сегодня современный Шерлок Холмс не помешал бы. Но сегодня в роли коллективного инспектора Лестрейда выступает высокопоставленный член британского правительства, которые сыпят безответственными, бездоказательными, поверхностными, чудовищными обвинениями. Боже упаси меня подозревать современных сотрудников Скотланд-Ярда в непрофессионализме. Хотя сегодня современный Шерлок Холмс не помешал бы. Но сегодня в роли коллективного инспектора Лестрейда выступают высокопоставленные члены британского правительства, которые сыпят безответственными, бездоказательными, поверхностными, чудовищными обвинениями, что имеет далеко идущие последствия. Россия призывает официальных лиц Великобритании отказаться от имперских практик XIX века, без ультиматумов, без доказательных обвинений и угроз, расстаться с неоколониальными замашками и вернуться в правовое поле. В ситуациях, подобных изложенных в заявлениях Терезы Мэй, принято обращение к инструменту правовой помощи.
By Theresa May, normally what should be done is using instruments of legal assistance.
Подытоживая, хотел бы еще раз заявить следующее.
Let me say once again,
Россия не причастна к этому инциденту. Ультиматумы Лондона мы считаем ничтожными.
From London is something that we consider to be something that we cannot pay attention to, and we expect. We consider null and void.
Ожидаем, что Соединенное Королевство будет действовать в строгом соответствии с Конвенцией о запрещении химического оружия, другими международными актами, включая Европейскую конвенцию о правовой помощи по уголовным делам, а также предоставит образцы вещества, на которые ссылается британское следствие, для совместного расследования, коль ему приписано российское происхождение. Это не факультативное, а обязательное требование по Конвенции. Мы к такому расследованию готовы. Нам бояться и скрывать нечего. О механизме задействования пункта 2 статьи 9 Конвенции о запрещении химического оружия мы уже говорили. Если полученные разъяснения будут сочтены недостаточными, можно будет обратиться за содействием к руководящим органам ОСПО. Это единственный цивилизованный вариант регулирования вопроса. Раз уж нас абсолютно безосновательно обвинили в несоблюдении конвенции, бесплотного диалога специалистов различного профиля здесь не обойтись. Мы готовы к открытому и конструктивному сотрудничеству в заключение,
conclusion, Mr. President, we would like to disseminate a draft statement for the press, which sums up my statement and emphasizes the fact that the mechanisms in Chapter 9 of the Chemical Weapons Conventions are mentioned, and we hope and expect that all members of the Council will support this. Thank you.
Well, I personally don't think he's crazy. I think he made damn good points. And here's another point on this. Countries don't like to be weak. Like, people who are in charge of countries, whether you're talking about president, prime ministers, whatever, they don't like to be weak. What is the... what? No way. No way, I don't believe that. Wesley Walker, are you serious? Surprise, motherfucker. Are you serious? Wesley Walker, you can't be serious. You can't be serious. Thank you, Wesley Walker. Thank you. That's... wow. So Wesley Walker has put surprise motherfucker and has made a really big donation. Thank you, Wesley Walker. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Let's see. All right. I'm shocked by that, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you a lot. Man, wow. I appreciate it. That's... wow. Yeah, Wesley. Thank you, man. I'm speechless on that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, super donation of the year for the millennium. That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, I forgot what I was gonna say. That's amazing. All right, so I know what I was gonna say. Leaders don't like to appear weak. That's what I was gonna say. Like, we sometimes fall into these situations, like of wars. We can tumble into these things. In many respects, a leader has to take a position, and appearing weak is not going to be a position that these leaders take. Theresa May, given an ultimatum, was never going to go anywhere. It could never go anywhere. What was Russia going to do? Kowtow to Theresa May's ultimatum like they're a spoiled child, or like their child being chastised? It's never going to happen. It was never going to happen. So, I would just say, I'm going to end this. I can't keep this one long because I have to do something. But be wary of your government. What he said, yes, he's a Russian. No, that shouldn't matter. What he said was right. If we're going to do this, this needs to be done through an international body, and I need to be able to see the evidence that you're using to say that I'm guilty. So, I think he's right. Theresa May a total stooge. I don't know if she's a total stooge, but yeah, I don't know if she's a total stooge, but on this one, this sounds a little dicey to me. I want to see the evidence before jumping to that conclusion that Russia did it. The guy's not wrong. Anybody would do it. Any person, any state should be afforded the right to see the evidence that's being used against them. It looks dicey to me because I know that CIA in Britain, let's just say their governments are not necessarily the most trustworthy in the world when it comes to spycraft. And until I see the actual evidence of this, I don't necessarily believe it. So, but again, Russia could have did it. I guess I exist in this place of not believing it or disbelieving it, which allows me to kind of listen to what they're saying versus what Theresa May is saying. And to me, it all boils down to, okay, I understand what you think it is, but show me the evidence that I can see so I can demonstrate what it is. I can prove what it is. You don't have legitimacy to me. Show me the evidence. I want to see the evidence. If you're hiding it from me, it makes me think you don't have any evidence. So, yeah, he's not wrong saying the international body should be able to evaluate what you're putting out. I don't think that's crazy at all. So, I'm going to end this. Wesley, my mind is blown. Thank you very much. Surprise motherfucker indeed. Thank you guys. Y'all have a good one.